Now with continued analysis of tonight's election 2016 right here on KRDO News Channel 13. We are joined by political science professor at UCCS, Josh Dunn, also a KRDO News Channel 13 political analyst. The big news tonight, Trump likely winning.
Right. This is absolutely shocking. If you had asked people a year and a half ago, a year ago, if Donald Trump had any chance of becoming president of the United States, you would had difficulty finding more than one or two people who said yes. So the fact that he has actually pulled this off, it is a remarkable political achievement, regardless of your view of the worthiness of his candidacy. This is extraordinary, and it's a political earthquake. And we, going forward, we don't know what this means for Washington. We certainly know that it's going to be entertaining, but entertaining can be good or bad. But this is, it really is an extraordinary night. The election itself, you had two just fundamentally flawed candidates from both parties. So I think for many Americans, they're just glad to have this ordeal over with. But if you look at it, any other Democrat would have easily beaten Donald Trump, or any other Republican would have won a landslide victory against Clinton. So in some ways, it was just a battle of attrition. So it's going to be difficult for Donald Trump to claim a mandate going forward from this, but of course he will. Nonetheless, it's just absolutely shocking.
Now, there's a lot of implications from Donald Trump taking the office of the president. Mm-hmm. How do you see the first 90 days playing out with regard to Obamacare, with regard to the Supreme Court? I mean, there's a lot to talk about, but what do you see as the biggest things out?
Of course, the first thing will be replacing Justice Scalia. For Republicans, this might be the most important effect of Donald Trump winning the presidency, is now Merrick Garland is not going to be the replacement for Justice Scalia. And so who Donald Trump selects to replace Scalia will determine a lot, I think, about his relationship with Republican members of Congress. Many Republicans on Capitol Hill deeply dislike Donald Trump. And so one of the questions going forward, once again, is whether or not they'll be able to work together. And if Donald Trump puts someone forward to the Senate that Republicans regard as a solid choice for replacing one of their beloved justices, it will go a long way to repairing some of those damaged relationships that he has with Republicans in Congress.
At what point in the evening did you say this could be Trump's race to have? He was going in as the extreme underdog into this evening, and then some of those toss-up states started not just edging red, but like bleeding red.
Right. So when things stayed very close in Florida, because he had to win Florida in order to win the presidency. When things stayed close in Florida, then you thought, well, maybe he has a bit of a puncher's chance here. And then North Carolina, it was very close. And then when things got to Michigan and Pennsylvania, that's when it became very apparent that he had a chance to win. You saw the New York Times suddenly their model predicting that Trump was likely to win the presidency, and that at no point in the history of this presidential election had Trump ever been the favorite in their model. And so I think that happened around 8:30, and so they were sensing pretty early on that Hillary Clinton wasn't performing as well in some of the urban areas that she needed to perform really well in. They were probably comparing her performance to Barack Obama's performance 2008, 2012, and she just didn't have the margins. And so it was around then that it became a reality that Donald Trump might be our next president.
So how do you explain the extreme difference between the polls coming in tonight and those exactly turning on their head? You attribute that to some phenomenon that we've seen play out before here in the nation.
Yes, this is a known phenomenon. It's called the Bradley effect, and it's when people responding to polls give the response that they think the pollster wants to hear rather than what their actual opinion is. And so in this election, many people probably responded to pollsters and said that they were voting for Hillary Clinton because they thought that the pollster wanted to hear that, and that the pollster would look down on them if they said Donald Trump, those kinds of reasons. And so this Bradley effect, it goes back to a gubernatorial candidate from California in the early 1980s, Tom Bradley, who looked like he was going to win that election, and he ended up not winning because people were just lying to pollsters. We saw something similar in Britain with Brexit. The polls going into that looked like a majority was in favor of staying. And of course, a majority said no, they wanted to leave. And so in some ways, it's similar here. This is in a way a revolt against the elites in the United States that they had in Britain. All the elites said, we have to stay, we have to stay, we have to stay. And here the elite said, well, Trump just really isn't suited for this office, so obviously we can't select him as president. And you sense there was something like that going on as well.
Ironically, Colorado, one of the states where the pollsters appear to have been pretty close. How do you attribute what played out here compared to what played out at so many other states across the country?
Right. So, yeah, Colorado played true to form. It performed like we expected it was going to. I think that the demographics of the state did not favor Donald Trump, and so that's the primary reason why. There might also be some defection on the Republican side to the Libertarian Party, particularly here in El Paso County, where Republicans, they aren't just any kind of Republican. They tend to be very libertarian, and Donald Trump is in many ways not libertarian, and so many things that Donald Trump stands for they're deeply opposed to, and so it could be that that really ate into his vote here in Colorado. So I think those are the two primary reasons. One, it's just the demographics of the state, and then also the Republicans here in Colorado, and especially El Paso County, where you have to win big. Donald Trump's just not their kind of Republican.
Do the results tonight make you think that we are now moving from a purple state more to a true blue state?
Yeah, I think that we're much closer to blue than we were yesterday. And that's partly because Donald Trump will likely be the Republican standard bearer in another 4 years. Now, if Republicans run other candidates like Cory Gardner in future elections, they can be competitive. But Donald Trump is not the kind of Republican who's going to run well in Colorado. And so if he's going to be the leader of the Republican Party going forward, and that's the kind of person that the Republican Party here tries to put forward, I don't think they will, but if that's the kind of person that you try to put forward, then we certainly will be a blue state rather than a purple state.
Some of these statewide issues, Proposition 106 getting a lot of attention, the Right to Die Act, mimicking what Oregon put into place 20 years ago. That was a big shocker today. Most Coloradans saying, yes, we want the right to die if someone is terminally ill.
65%.
Right, yeah, so overwhelming majorities, so it wins easily. In some ways, it's unfortunate that this issue had to be decided during this election because the presidential election really occupied our attention. There wasn't a lot of time for discussion or debate or even opportunity to advertise. And so I think the voters of Colorado were deprived of an opportunity to engage in real serious deliberation about this issue, and it's something that really deserves it. So in some ways it's unfortunate, but I guess perhaps the result isn't entirely surprising.
KRDO News Channel 13 political analyst Josh Dunn, we appreciate your time throughout the evening and throughout this election season for all your insight. And don't go too far. We may not be done covering this election just yet.
Thanks for having me.